So what approaches can you take for reducing emissions to address this climate change externality? There are two types of approaches. One is command and control. So you put regulations and you police people to follow the rules. Or it's incentivized to reduce emissions, such as market-based approaches that we talked about. Command and control approaches come in three flavors in general. The first type is an emissions standard. We all have that for vehicles, for example, and then we learned about the Volkswagen emissions test where they were tinkering with the software and resulted in pretty severe excessive emissions that actually were not counted because of this cheating. And recently it's been found that the truck drivers in the US are tampering with the system as well to cheat on emissions so that they can burn more fuel without being penalized for it. So there is an incentive to cheat there as well. So control is needed, which is what catches these kind of cheatings. So this simply prescribe how much an emitter can each emitter can emit. Okay. The second is an input target, which prescribes which type of input to production an emitter has to use. For example, a low sulfur fuel. So unleaded gasoline has been introduced a long time because lead is really bad for health. It's a dangerous carcinogen as well. So those kind of limitations can be input even for the industries. Another example of an input target is a low carbon fuel standard where the octane number of the fuel can be prescribed or regulated, but typically that comes with increased cost as well. Okay, and it doesn't necessarily account for the carbon emission at source where the fuel is being produced to have a low carbon standard. Third type of command and control is a technology standard, which prescribes a specific technology. For example, electric vehicles. So California has always had its own very strict fuel efficiency standards for cars and trucks. But you can also begin to impose electric vehicles. Obviously, that means the infrastructure has to be built for charging, and the cost of the car also has to be considered because not everybody can afford it if they are expensive. Okay. Tesla, for example, was expensive for a long time, and now they are trying to produce for the general market, which is still more expensive than some of the cheaper cars you can buy. In the incentive and market-based approaches, there are also three flavors. First, an emission fee or tax, which charges an emitter the marginal external cost and makes the emitter internalize this cost. So if you're emitting and you're paying for it, then you're internalizing that cost of the externality. Hence, the emitter is paying for the full opportunity cost of its activity, which means if you want to drive, you are doing it for some reason. If you don't drive, you lose that. For example, if you're driving to see a national park, then not driving is the opportunity cost of not seeing the park, right? So you pay for it. The second is a cap and trade system, which caps the total amount of emissions and issues a right to pollute for each ton emitted, which can then be trapped. This approach essentially places a price on carbon, which we have already seen a couple of times, as the permits have a price. So this is the idea of somebody having space in their emissions and somebody buying permits from you to emit to make up for the gap you have between the limit that is set by the cap and trade system. This is considered working very well by some, and some argue that this has not worked very well. Okay, the final incentive-based approach is subsidizing certain low-carbon technologies or fuels, which artificially lowers their price in the market and increases the incentive for adoption. So you get a tax rebate for buying a hybrid car, for example. Okay, that incentivizes you to buy a hybrid car instead of a fuel guzzling car. Okay, so that's a subsidizing of technology. So we've talked about how fossil fuel subsidies, now hidden in various ways, are actually promoting more fossil fuel use. If you're getting gasoline for cheap at the pump, you are incentivized to drive more, or at least not worry too much about driving when you have to. So there is a negative impact of those kind of subsidies for fossil fuel. So what is opportunity cost? These are some examples. The cost of war. If the government spends some money on a war, then it's that money that could be going into education, healthcare, or cutting taxes. The same for building roads. If you build a new road, then you may get it out of education and healthcare. Tax cuts, if government is offering income tax cut, for example, to churn up the economy again after COVID lockdowns, then the opportunity cost is that government revenue cannot be used to finance some aspect of the government spending, like picking up trash maybe, or cleaning up the or even maintaining the national parks for visitors, etc. Time. If you have 12 hours at your disposal during the day, you could spend these hours in work or at leisure. The opportunity cost of time spending all day watching TV is that you are not able to do any study during the day. So if you're a student listening to this, I think you know very well what that opportunity cost is. Entering the workforce at 16. If you enter the workforce at 16 without qualification, you start earning right away at that early age and you start making money, but the opportunity cost is that you lose out on the potential of getting better qualifications and possibly higher salary in the long run. So the lifetime earning can be diminished even though you earned more by starting early. So those are the ideas for approaches for reducing externality cost and worrying about the opportunity cost for reducing greenhouse gas emissions.